I just wanted to give a quick overview. I've been practicing my sales skills by sitting in on a life insurance offer where the agency allows us to pay $250 for access to a CRM that makes dials for us, and we get essentially free leads after that. And you can earn back to $250 if you sell enough business on these leads. So these are outbound age leads, non-exclusive, with the occasional live transfer sprinkled in. I probably had 10 live transfers and then probably 295 other calls that were just outbound dials where the prospect picked up. So I wanted to share my data on what objections are most common. And the reason I chose to wait for 300 dials is because I used to work in market research, and 300 was a good sample size to tell you that you have like a pretty clear read on the data by that point. So here's the most common objections that I got. Number one, of the 304 people who picked up, 110 hung up without a clear explanation, so about a third. But in terms of objections that I was given the opportunity to address, most common is someone saying, I already took care of it. I already have it through work. I've got it through my spouse's work. I'm in good shape. I already have something covered through the VA or military, or like I already have a burial package or a cremation package. So that's about 25% of people tell you they already have it taken care of, and they mean different things by that. Most of the time, they're just trying to get you off the phone. The way I handle that one, I think all of these objection handles, I was trained by Dana Neeson, so check her out on YouTube. But for this objection handle, we go very direct. We say, "Oh, that's great. You support them in the decision that they've made. Oh, that's great. How long ago did you get it?" You're asking them a very easy to answer question and supporting them and celebrating the fact that they have life insurance. Um, and asking how long ago did they get it, and you want to know if they have an old policy or they have a new policy. So if they're like, well, I just got it a week ago, then what we say is, okay, well, while I have you here on the phone, would it be reasonable to offer you one more quote just to make sure you got the best policy available? And I've found that that actually breaks the objection like 20 to 40% of the time. So it's quite effective, but you do need a script kind of modification from there to get you to the end point. And we're not just pitching them a lower price. So you got to have some sort of angle that you can get to that allows them to demonstrate the value of what you do. So you're not just pitching a lower price. But that's really the only objection handle I found to be effective and also lead to sales. But I will share what else we've explored. So the next most common objection is just you tell people your opener, which we say, hey, this is just Ryan. I noticed you may have inquired about possibly looking at some coverage for you and your family, and I just had a chance to get back to you to see if I could help. So that's my opening line. And a lot of times, 20% of the time, they'll say, oh, no, no, thank you, not interested. And what we say is, oh, I didn't mean to offend you. It kind of just pauses them with that statement. You apologize, kind of disarms them. And then we say, were you not interested because you felt you couldn't afford it or because you felt like you may not qualify? And I'd say about 10% of the time you give that objection handle, they will say, yeah, it was too expensive or I couldn't qualify. Mostly they'll say it was too expensive, and then you've got to have a script to kind of go from there. But that'll break the objection about 10% of the time. Most of the time they'll just be like, no, I'm just not interested. And they won't give you much from that particular objection handle. So there's probably some room to improve that one. One objection that I've found really hard to break is when you call them, they might acknowledge that they were looking for insurance, but they'd be like, well, I don't have time. I'm really busy. I'm at work. I'm driving. I'm at the doctor. I'm not feeling well. Email me something. Just trying to get you off the phone. And so what we say right now with our objection handling, or my objection handling, what I say is, oh, that's not a problem. Well, while I have you here, would it be okay to just spend a couple of minutes to go through this just to see if it even makes sense to call you back later? And usually, I'd say 10% of the time you break the objection. The other 90% of the time they say, no, I'm busy. Call me back. And then you've got to have some sort of appointment scheduling, but really they're just trying to get you off the phone. So that's another 15% of the time. And then 10% of the time you call and they'll tell you that the person you're trying to call, it's either a wrong number, you've got the wrong person, or the wrong name. Another 5% of the time, they'll tell you, oh, I didn't do that. I didn't fill that out. I don't remember. It wasn't me. That was a long time ago. And then we have for that, we say, oh, That's not a problem. It looks like you may have clicked something online with one of our partners about possibly looking to cover out of pocket funeral expenses for your family. Does that ring a bell? You're just trying to jog their memory and play along, and that works 10% of the time. Um, Sometimes they'll just tell you, oh, no, it's too expensive. That's the best one to break. You're not going to get that very often. They're not just going to come out and say they can't afford it. You kind of want to lead them into that path. And for that one, we say, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not sure if this would help you, but we do have plans that start as low as $20 a month. Would that be more affordable at all? And a lot of times they'll be like, yeah, I want to hear more. So that can work. I get that objection about 5% of the time. Um, Another objection that I get, because when they pick up the phone, we say, it looks like you've been looking for coverage, and we don't say final expense life insurance, because when you say that, you'll get a lot more hangups. So we want to leave it kind of open ended with coverage and let them fill in the blanks. But a lot of time they will say, wait, what's this about? What type of coverage? Who is this? Is this about Medicare? I already have car insurance. What kind of protection is this? And then you've got to clarify, oh, I apologize if I didn't mention earlier. This is just Ryan. It looks like you had filled out something online about possibly wanting to leave some funds for the family just in case something were to happen unexpectedly. Does that ring a bell? And so they're like, oh, life insurance. Yeah, I was looking into it, but this, and this happened. And then you're kind of into the conversation. So that one's actually, it's more of an obstacle than an objection. In fact, my current manager, when she hears that, she said, oh, there was no objection, which I kind of find funny. That's how tough these leads are, that's not an objection. But another objection that's really hard to break is like, you'll talk to a guy and be like, oh, my wife handles all that. I don't know. She's not here. Or, oh yeah, I got to talk to my son about that. He was looking into that for me. And they're kind of like saying, this is not my responsibility. I don't handle it, which is tough to break because it's really a fundamental belief that they're not responsible for this. And that's tough to break when you're just calling in cold and you have no rapport. Another challenge I found is some people want like a $2 million policy, and we're only going to be able to offer them like 20,000. So there's just a mismatch in their expectations. It's not so much an objection. You can get through the call, but you've got to know how to kind of change their expectations as you get through the call. And then there's all these other little objections that'll come and play about 5% of the time that don't really merit the time to invest to learn how to break them because they don't come up that often. So this was 300 people who picked up the phone. We have an automatic dialer. I'm guessing it made like 3,000 dials to get these pickups. So 3,000 leads, 300 pickups, 100 people told me to buzz off or hung up without an explanation. 25% told me already took care of it. 20% said not interested, wouldn't give me a reason. 15% said they don't have time or they're busy. About 10% said it's the wrong number. I'm not that name. I'm not that person that you're trying to call. 5% don't remember filling anything out. 5% can't tell me they can't afford or life insurance is too expensive. 5% aren't clear on what I'm offering and I have to clarify. And another 5% say they don't handle that type of transaction or take responsibility for that in their family. So those are the main objections you'll have to learn how to break if you want to get really good at breaking outbound leads not breaking, but closing outbound leads. For my results, I submitted 5 applications on 300 pickups. It's not great, but apparently for our organization, that's pretty good. Profit undetermined. Most of these people didn't have any money in their bank account, so they had to defer payment like 30 days. So I'm not even sure if these applications are going to stay on the book and if I'm going to make any profit. It's kind of one of the challenging parts of this type of life insurance that we're selling. My main learnings from this: lead quality absolutely matters. Don't let an IMO tell you that exclusive versus non-exclusive leads don't matter. It does. Any sort of incremental improvement you can get in lead quality makes you more effective and more efficient with your time. So keep searching for a higher lead quality. I think agents in general need to keep putting pressure on IMOs and agencies to deliver higher lead quality. I think they're keeping too much of the profit and not investing enough time and energy and effort in producing great leads. That's a real opportunity. I think there's a better opportunity for someone to learn how to make life insurance ads than there is for someone to learn how to sell life insurance. That's kind of a key learning I've had so far, 6 months into the business. When you're on a free leads offer like I am right now, trying to track objections like this is very time consuming. It slows you down because you have to track each lead and you're kind of waiting for a new call to come. So sometimes you'll pause the dialer so you fill out your tracker. So this was a time intensive exercise, but it gave me clarity on where I should focus my time. So objection tracking will slow you down. in like kind of your first 2 months of doing this, as you're tracking things, you probably don't need to track this closely after you've kind of had this learning. And then two, objection handling stifles your results. Like, it would just be easier for every time that I called someone if I was like, oh, hey, it's just Ryan calling. It looks like you'd inquired about possibly looking for some coverage for you and your family, and I just had a chance to get back to you to see if I could help. And then if they give me any sort of objection, it would just be, it would be more efficient. I would make more money if I just said, oh, okay, sorry, I couldn't help you. And just kept searching for the lead who was like, oh, yeah, I just filled that out yesterday. Or, oh, yeah, I just was thinking about it, but I didn't get around to it. And then you're into a conversation, because in a free leads factory, they're just going to keep giving you dials. But what happens is the managers don't like your efficiency. They'll say you're burning through leads. And it's like, well, you're giving me terrible leads and the expectation. So here there are 390 objections or hangups and 300 calls. So I literally have to be prepared to break 1 to 2 objections per call to get a sale, which is crazy from the world I've come from, other places where you're not supposed to really get that many objections until you're at the presentation and give them the price. Here you're just fighting objections the entire way, which it's a whole nother skill set. But when you do try to objection handle, it keeps you on the phone for a longer amount of time with a prospect who's less likely to buy. Whereas like the most successful agents would figure out a way to just burn through all the leads and quickly hang up on people until they find someone interested in talking about life insurance. The other thing I found is that waiting time is a big limiter. So I might sit there for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, depending on the time, waiting for someone to pick up. And that's just time I don't get paid for. It's not compensated. It's waiting time. That can also be a limiter. I usually have an hour a day of just waiting time that I'm not paid for. And then, like, how does this model even work? What I've noticed is I've worked with one, two, three. I'm looking at a fourth IMO. So I've worked with 3 IMOs, explored 4 or 5. And what I've seen every single time is that IMOs try to recruit an agent who doesn't have very much money and who's happy with relatively low hourly earnings. And they just try to get them to put in high activity levels for what I perceive to be very low compensation. Like, I've heard each of my IMOs talk about people can make 100 to 200 grand, which to me is still not very much, but it's okay. But I don't see anyone in these IMOs making that, except for maybe I've seen one person and one offer possibly making 200 grand, and he's spending, I think, like 200 to 300 grand on leads, and he's very detail oriented, process oriented. He's got his own like branded website. He's got his own packets that he sends out to customers that are separate from what the life insurance sends. He was in the business a long time in field sales before he got into telesales, so he knows all his carriers down to the T. Very experienced, and does just an enormous volume of calls, and he spends $70 per lead for television inbound leads. So from what I've seen so far in the industry, not very encouraging. And I think the biggest problem that needs to be solved in the industry, and something I need to look into, is how to get leads that are higher intent, higher quality, so that you spend less of your time trying to convince them to want to look into it. I mean, that's just business 101, is you want to be talking to people who have an interest in what you're doing. So this is my summary of 300 outbound final expense telesales calls. This would not be the approach that I would look to do unless you find an agency who gets you better numbers than this. All right. Hope that helps.